A casino floor, an Amazon product page, your bank's credit card offer, 3 different industries, 3 different environments, 3 vastly different amounts of money involved. And underneath all of them, the same psychological mechanism, operating in the same way, exploiting the same feature of the human brain that has never changed. The mechanism was first identified in a psychology lab in the 1950s, using pigeons and a lever. And what B.F. Skinner discovered in that experiment has since been deliberately engineered into every slot machine ever built, into the architecture of the world's largest e-commerce platform, into the interest rate structures of consumer credit, and into your phone, your shopping habits, and your relationship with money in ways most people never consciously identify. This is the series finale, and we're going to end it with the one psychological trick that ties everything together, the mechanism underneath the mechanisms. The reason that knowing about your biases is often not enough to stop them, and the 3-step system that actually is. Sophie is 36. She doesn't gamble often, maybe twice a year, on a girls' trip, a $50 budget she sets in advance. She is not impulsive with money in most areas of her life. She budgets. She has a pension. She would not describe herself as someone who struggles with spending, but she has noticed something she can't quite explain. At the casino, she almost always ends up spending more than $50. Not because she loses track, because something keeps her playing past the point she intended. A near win. Another spin. A sense that the pattern is about to break in her favor. On Amazon, she buys things she didn't intend to buy. Not expensive things. A $12 item here, a $24 item there. But more than she plans to, and more often. Something about the way the page is laid out, the countdown timer on the deal, the customers who bought this also bought section, it pulls her forward in ways she can't quite articulate. And with her bank, she has a credit card she took out because the promotional interest rate seemed reasonable, and the credit limit felt like a safety net. She has never fully paid it off. The minimum payment is easy to make. The balance never quite goes down. Sophie is not financially reckless. She is financially average, and the casino, Amazon, and her bank are not taking advantage of her carelessness. They are taking advantage of her neurology. Specifically, of a mechanism so deeply embedded in human cognition that even knowing about it provides only partial protection against it. That mechanism is called variable reward, and it was not designed for any of these environments. It evolved for a world that no longer exists, and it has been weaponized for a world that does. In the 1950s, psychologist B.F. Skinner put pigeons in a box. The box had a lever. When the pigeon pressed the lever, it received food pellets. Skinner varied the schedule. Sometimes the lever always produced food. Sometimes it produced food on a fixed schedule. And sometimes, the condition that produced the most extraordinary results, it produced food randomly, on no predictable schedule at all. The pigeons in the random condition pressed the lever obsessively. They pressed it far more than the pigeons who received food every time. The unpredictability, the uncertainty of when the reward would arrive, produced behavior that was more persistent, more compulsive, and more resistant to stopping than any other schedule Skinner tested. He called this variable ratio reinforcement, and it is the most powerful schedule of reward ever documented in the psychology of behavior. It works on humans for the same reason it works on pigeons. Because dopamine, the neurotransmitter your brain uses to motivate behavior, is released not when you receive a reward, but when you anticipate one. And the anticipation is strongest when the outcome is uncertain. Guaranteed reward is boring to the dopamine system. Certain reward allows the brain to disengage because it knows what's coming. Uncertain reward keeps the dopamine system permanently activated because the next press of the lever, the next spin, the next scroll, the next click might be the one. And the brain, unable to predict which one it will be, keeps generating the motivation to try again. This is not a character weakness. It is a neurological fact about how the human brain is built. And casino designers, user experience engineers, and consumer credit architects have spent decades learning to exploit it with extraordinary precision. Dopamine doesn't fire when you get the reward. It fires when you might. That single fact is the foundation of every slot machine, every infinite scroll, and every promotional interest rate ever designed. Watch how the same mechanism operates across all three of Sophie's environments. In the casino, modern slot machines are engineered around the near-miss effect, the landing of two matching symbols and one miss, which activates the dopamine pathways almost as strongly as an actual win. Research confirms that near misses recruit identical brain circuits as genuine rewards. The machine is designed to lose in a way that feels like almost winning. Combined with variable payout timing, sometimes you win on spin 3, sometimes on spin 47. The brain never gets the signal to disengage. Each spin is potentially the one. On Amazon, the countdown timer, deal ends in 47 minutes, is an anchor. The price crossed out above the discounted price is an anchor. The customers who bought this also bought Carousel is a variable reward loop. Most suggestions are irrelevant, but occasionally one is exactly what you were looking for. The uncertainty of which suggestion will land keeps you scrolling. The lightning bolt sale badge creates artificial urgency, and the frictionless one-click checkout removes the moment of hesitation that might otherwise interrupt the dopamine loop. At the bank, the promotional interest rate, 0% for 12 months, is anchoring bias from episode 4 of this series, applied to credit. The original high rate is the anchor, the promotional rate is the deal. And the minimum payment framing, just $28 this month, exploits present bias from episode 1. It makes the long-term cost invisible by making the short-term cost as small as possible. The balance never meaningfully decreases because the minimum is designed to keep it circulating, generating interest indefinitely. The estimated annual cost to Sophie of variable reward exploitation across 3 environments: casino overruns around $300, unplanned Amazon purchases around $600, and credit card interest on a carried balance around $840. Total, approximately $1,740 a year, and compounded over 30 years at a 7% return, over $175,000. Individually, none of these amounts seems catastrophic. That is precisely the point. Variable reward exploitation doesn't feel like being robbed. It feels like slightly overspending in ways you can't quite trace. The mechanism works not through dramatic events, but through accumulated small decisions, each one individually justifiable, collectively expensive, and almost impossible to attribute to a specific cause without understanding what's actually driving them. Variable reward is the hardest bias in this series to defend against because it operates below the level of conscious decision-making. You don't decide to be motivated by uncertainty. The dopamine system simply responds. The defenses, therefore, are structural, not willpower-based. Defense 1. Pre-commit with friction before you enter the environment. The variable reward loop is hardest to break once it's running. The decision to limit it must happen before you enter the environment, not during. For the casino, withdraw cash in the exact amount you intend to spend. Leave your card at the hotel. The physical constraint removes the in-the-moment decision entirely. The decision was already made, in a context where the dopamine system wasn't activated. For Amazon, use a browser extension that removes countdown timers and also bought carousels. Create a wish list and enforce a 48-hour rule. Nothing purchased the same day you find it. The delay gives the dopamine spike time to subside and allows rational evaluation to re-enter. For credit, pay the full balance every month by setting up an automatic payment for the full statement balance, not the minimum. This converts a variable reward credit instrument back into a fixed outcome one. The uncertainty is removed. Defense 2. Name what's happening in real time. Research on cognitive biases consistently shows that naming a bias as it occurs, literally saying or thinking the label, partially reduces its effect. The mechanism is called cognitive diffusion, creating psychological distance between you and the automatic response by labeling it. When you feel the pull to make one more spin, click one more product, or accept the credit offer, and you can identify the sensation as a dopamine anticipation response rather than a genuine desire, the feeling does not disappear, but it becomes legible. You can observe it rather than simply respond to it. This is variable reward operating on my dopamine system is not a phrase that fits naturally into a casino floor or an Amazon checkout, but it is a phrase that changes the relationship between you and the mechanism. It shifts you from participant to observer, even briefly, and briefly is often enough. Defense 3. Replace the variable reward loop with a designed alternative. The dopamine system does not go away when you remove the casino, the app, or the credit card. It will find something to be uncertain about. The most sustainable defense against variable reward exploitation is not deprivation, it is substitution. Design a variable reward loop that serves you. Investment accounts, where the market's daily movements provide genuine uncertainty and occasional reward, engage the same dopamine pathways as slot machines, but with a positive expected return rather than a negative one. A side project with uncertain outcomes. A creative practice with unpredictable results. The brain's appetite for uncertainty and potential reward is not a flaw. It is a feature. It drove every exploration, every invention, every risk worth taking in human history. The question is not how to eliminate it, but how to aim it at something that compounds in your favor, rather than draining you incrementally every month. Sophie came back from the girls' trip with $147 spent instead of $50. She bought 3 things from Amazon she didn't plan to in the same week. Her credit card balance is $2,800, and she's had it for 2 years. None of that is because Sophie lacks intelligence, discipline, or financial knowledge. It is because she lives in an environment specifically engineered to exploit the way her brain works. And her brain works the same way every human brain works. Over the past 8 episodes, we've covered the biases that shape almost every financial decision most people will ever make. Loss aversion, which keeps you in bad positions too long. The sunk cost fallacy, which makes you double down on decisions you should exit. Lifestyle inflation, which absorbs every raise before it can compound. Anchoring bias, which lets the first number in the room control all the numbers that follow. Overconfidence, which makes expertise dangerous before it makes it useful. Money scripts, the childhood beliefs running your finances without your knowledge or consent. Relative deprivation, the mechanism that ensures no income level feels like enough. And now, variable reward, the underlying engine that casinos, platforms, and financial institutions have all learned to activate. What I want you to take away from this series is not a list of things to be afraid of. The biases we've covered are not character flaws, and they are not uniquely yours. They are features of the human cognitive system, features that evolved for a world very different from the one we live in, and that are now being deliberately exploited by trillion-dollar industries that understand them better than most individuals ever will. Knowing about them is not sufficient protection, but it is the beginning of something that is. Because when you can name what's happening, when you can recognize loss aversion in the moment you're about to hold a losing position or variable reward, in the moment you're about to click just one more time, you create a gap, a moment of space between the stimulus and the response. And in that gap, a different choice becomes possible. Not always, not perfectly, but more often than before. And in personal finance, more often than before is the difference between a life that builds and a life that drains, quietly, one small decision at a time. That is the series, all 8 of them. If any one of these videos named something you'd been feeling but couldn't explain, if any of the people in these stories felt familiar, share this series with someone who would benefit from it. That is genuinely the most useful thing you can do. We'll be back with a new series, different biases, same approach. Subscribe if you want to catch it. Thank you for watching all of this. I mean that. I'll see you in the next one.